Greetings one and all, I'm Red Angel, and I'm here to analyze fourth wall breaking narratives and the parasocial relationships developed by players in the games Off, Undertale, and OneShot. Spoiler warning, I'm going to be spoiling Off, Undertale, and OneShot. You have been warned. The point of view in a narrative has always been an interesting subject for me because it can lead to a variety of outcomes. It provides us, the viewer, the reader, or the players, with an entirely different view on the story and with it on the work itself. We might usually be the outsider looking in, but there are times when we are put directly in the role of someone who is actually there. When writing, a writer must choose a point of view to write in to figure out how they're going to tell the story to the person consuming their work. Here's how it works in literature for those of you who may be unfamiliar. First person. First person point of view uses the I and we pronouns. Examples include Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. It's the point of view people use to limit the reader's perspective exclusively to the point of view of one character. It's possible, however, to focus on more than one depending on the number of protagonists, however, limiting the focus completely to their versions of events. It's why books with this point of view often don't translate well to the silver screen, which may give us a character who lacks clear motivations for why they're doing what they're doing. See the first Hunger Games film in reference to this, which is something I will cover in a future video. First person can also offer the omniscient point of view, similarly to third person. Yet, instead of taking on the role of multiple characters, it acts more as an omnipresent narrator, often in the form of some deity-like figure. The novel The Book Thief is a good example of this, because the narrator was Death, speaking of a time long ago. There's another example of a book in first person that lost much in translation to cinema. It's funny how that works. Second person. Second person is very rarely used in novels. It uses the you pronoun, addressing the reader as the main character with their own backstories and purpose. This works especially well for choose-your-own-adventure novels, but for novels that are written in a more traditional manner, it isn't the best writing style to go with, unless you're going through a very stylized period, or you just hate your readers and don't want them to enjoy reading your books. That last part was mostly a joke. Mostly. A good example of this style would be If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino, which is one of the few second-person books I can recommend and uses the writing style in a more experimental way. Third person. Now, here's what people are most familiar with. Third-person books are told from an outsider looking in perspective of the main character, addressing them by him, her, them, or their name. It traditionally has a limited point of view, where while we see the character from the outsider's perspective, we only see their world generally by how they see it, limiting the knowledge we know. Then there's the omniscient point of view, which goes from character to character as well as all of the characters in the world at large. For an omniscient point of view, think about the Lord of the Rings books, and for a limited one, think about the Harry Potter series. These books are the easiest to transition into film, and they have some of the most loyal book-to-film adaptations like A Time to Kill and The Godfather. Not to say that first-person can't have loyal adaptations, it just appears to be easier to transition a third-person narrative to a film. With all of these points of view in mind, the question is, where in the world do video games fall in that general spectrum? Nowhere, really. Games are designed different from books, and while they may resemble each other from the point of view of literature, placing them under the same umbrella would in many ways do them a disservice. Games, much like film before them, are their own separate medium, and it's important to view them as such. Sure, we could say that Sonic the Hedgehog is a third-person narrative driven entirely by your actions as Sonic, but then how do we classify games like Skyrim where you create your own character? First person because that character is us? Second person because it's referred to as you and it's sort of a choose-your-own-adventure game? It's why video games are their own separate medium narrative-wise and can't be as easily classified as a book, especially if you think in terms of the player's relationship to the character on screen. Most forms of media have a parasocial relationship, which is a one-sided relationship where one person extends the emotional energy and time to another person, or perhaps their YouTube persona, while the other is completely unaware of their existence. Think of it this way, if you watch my videos and you don't comment on them, yet you love my content and perhaps developed an attachment to me despite us never interacting before, that is an example of a parasocial relationship. This also applies to fictional characters that can never reciprocate your affection for them despite how much you may lavish onto them. To further define this, the article Children's Wishful Identification and Parasocial Interaction with Favorite Television Characters by Cynthia Hoffner states the following. Horton and Wall coined the term parasocial interaction to refer to the sense of an intimate social relationship with a media character or personality. After watching a television series for a period of time, viewers come to feel that they know the characters as well as friends or neighbors. In fact, the process of developing parasocial relationships has been likened to the process by which people come to know others in real life. Evidence suggests that parasocial interaction provides social and emotional gratifications for viewers and motivates continued viewing of programs. In addition, parasocial interaction may increase viewers' willingness to accept information from a media personality. Several studies with adults found that parasocial interaction was related to viewing programs for personally useful information. Despite the important implications of this finding, little is known about the character traits that contribute to parasocial interaction. You can also apply this to those who obsess about celebrities, that love a particularly famous person, or someone who you view as famous despite them not knowing you exist is another good example of this. Our relationship to media is similar to this, except with games we tend to be put in the role of the protagonist, which causes us to form these attachments easier because despite the fact that we may not be said protagonist, our attachment to their world and the problems may be far stronger due to the interactivity of it all. That renders the variety of gaming narratives rather troublesome to define by traditional standards. However, I'm going to discuss with all of you a very interesting sort of narrative that's been surging up as of late in gaming, a narrative that includes you in the game. Not just the player character that you create, not Joe Schmo Soldier Guy, not just Mario or Sonic, you, the person who decided to play this game in the first place. Video games have been breaking the fourth wall for years, addressing the player in a variety of ways, from Tomb Raider 2's infamous shower scene
Don't you think you've seen enough?
to Metal Gear Solid's Psycho Mantis scene.
Still don't believe me? Now I'll read more deeply into your soul. I can see into your mind. So, you like Suikoden? So, you like Azure Dreams? You like Castlevania, don't you?
Fourth wall breaking is hardly new, but I'm talking about games that put you directly in the role of the protagonist as the person behind the computer. Such as in Pony Island, you're playing a fourth wall breaking game against the devil where he addresses you as the player rather than the little horse you're playing as. Or how in the Stanley Parable, Stanley is basically an allegory for the player being trapped in the game. The list of these sorts of games goes on, but there were 3 games that I've played that take this experience to a whole new level in similar ways. These games are Off by Mortis Ghosts, Undertale by Toby Fox, and OneShot by Eliza Velasquez and Night Margin. All of these address players in ways that go outside the general norm for video games by not only addressing you as the player in a gaming sense, but having you, as a person, far more directly involved in events. Sure, we have games from Telltale that do this, and in many ways our choices do change things in the game, but we aren't actually the characters that are on screen, which gives us a small sense of distance. The person sitting in our comfy chair with the lights dimmed, toying with the lives of those in the virtual world, which forces you more than ever to develop a parasocial relationship with these worlds because unlike in most games, you are the one the game is addressing and the engagement solely relies on you, often breaking the fourth wall to tell you your significance. In these games, the player takes on 3 very important roles throughout their journey in each respective world. In Off, you're the executioner. In Undertale, the judge. And in OneShot, the Guardian, each of which have distinctive ways of involving the player in the story at large, leading to the aforementioned roles. Let's start off with Off, the oldest of the trio, and what I personally view as one of the predecessors for countless games that followed it, thanks to its deceptively simple narrative that only grows more complex as time goes on. When first starting off in the game, the player is prompted to put their name and their gender before telling them who they're assigned to. We as players are beings outside of this world, sent in to control and monitor the actions of the batter. It says that the batter is on an important mission, and we have to make sure that it's accomplished. The first thing the batter even says to us is,
"Move my body. Use the keys on your keyboard."
The tutorial is showing you how to control the actions of the batter, and it phrases the language in such a way that while we are in control of the batter, we are only doing so because we are assigned to him, in order to help him complete his mission. Interestingly enough, the only creature in the realm of Off who actually sees us in control of the strings of the batter is the judge, who is fully aware of us as the player as soon as we step in Zone 0.
There cannot be any other living beings in Zone 0, so I must assume that you are a mere figment of my imagination. Nevertheless, I will introduce myself. I am the judge, and I am aching to know your name, dear illusory interlocutor.
I am the batter. I've been assigned to a sacred mission.
It is a pleasure. However, it is not the puppet I was addressing, but the puppeteer controlling it. What is your name, dear puppeteer?
Her name is Angel. She can hear and see everything, but she can't talk to us.
Even though you are an inexistent apparition in my eyes, let it be said that I am delighted to meet you as well, dear Angel.
I believe we're in need of your services.
In the opening sequence, never once are we addressed as the batter. We are addressed directly as the player sitting beyond the computer screen, pressing the button and letting the scene play out. Throughout the game, the batter continues to address us during his times of need, but it happens less and less as time goes on. While the batter knows you are there with him and always addresses you separately from himself, he does continuously focus on his mission to destroy all life in the zones of the game, purifying them and cleansing them on this mission of his. At first, it seems as though he's just killing the ghosts and trying to liberate the odd little inhabitants of the world from their enslavement to their 3 overlords and their queen, which in terms of video game plotlines is standard stuff. However, you'll notice that the less and less he addresses you, the more and more it's blatant that the batter's intentions aren't exactly pure. You help him kill countless creatures that may not have deserved to die, then running around and wiping out all the life that remains in the zone. You continue to aid the batter in this mission because that's what you were told to do. That's what you were assigned, and who are you to question an assignment? Right? At the beginning of the game, your sense of self was meant to be separate from that of the batter, but as time goes on and you maul down countless creatures with his bat, essentially you're using him as a tool to become more powerful to eventually defeat the final boss. How far apart are you from the batter himself? We often identify ourselves as the game's protagonist, and it's the subject of many studies. In one such study, Identification with the Player Character as the Determinant for Video Game Enjoyment, written by Dorothy Hefner, Christoph Kimmitt, and Peter Wardner, they state the following. Through interactivity, then, video games override the distance between media users and media characters. Players either control directly one specific character or take on a social role represented in the game world. In both cases, players do not observe autonomous social entities performing on the screen, but they make the characters perform and actually perform themselves. McDonald and Kim report that young video game players perceive no distance at all to their game protagonists, but identify quite closely with them. Which means that because we are the ones controlling the actions of the batter, we may end up identifying as him, especially with the fact that we are addressed less and less by him throughout the game. If you take a cursory glance at a popular Let's Player, like Markiplier, his thumbnail art for the series shows himself as the batter, showing that he is taking on the role instead of the initially established role of the player, as do most players right up until the end of the game. Through all the atrocities we commit alongside the batter, controlling him as he pummels things to death with his bat, including what appears to be a manifestation of his wife, then we are given a choice whether or not we want to bludgeon a baby to death. This is the only part of the game that actually takes control out of the player's hands if we choose not to act, because we see no matter what we do, the batter kills the child. You can stall for however long you want, it's out of your hands because you aren't the batter, you've just been the one telling him who to execute and now he's taken that ability away from you. Even if you choose to shatter his skull, it's still another part of your role as executioner. Off is a dreary game and the graphics should have been your first clue. Nobody tries to reason with us, they try to reason with the batter because he's the one doing this and it helps blur the line between where we begin and where the batter ends. That is, until the end of the game. When we are faced with the gravity of our crimes by the judge himself, addressing us directly along with the batter, both of them trying to reason with you to help them one last time to clean up the mess you made. We are given a choice, and this is where our role as the executioner comes to a close. We can either kill the judge and finish the mission of the batter, or we can kill the batter for all he's done. The decision is yours, not the batter's, but you, the person behind the screen, deciding what path you will take. If you choose to wipe out the world, you've confirmed your role as the executioner for the sake of the batter, and the game truly ends. If you choose to kill the batter, you are suddenly shown that he is in fact a monster in more than just his actions. You watch a credits sequence with the judge returning to Zone 0 to resume his life there, not knowing if the world will reform or not. Just knowing that now at least your ability, your role as the executioner to do one good thing in your time in Off. Off makes the player go on a full bat bludgeoning spree, as our actions dictate who the batter will go after next, keeping us separate from him, all while the identity lines between us continue to blur. We're the force pushing him, but we aren't a force of evil, we are just doing what we were assigned to do, only to be told it was the wrong thing to do in the end. In Off, it's conveyed far more through the environment and subtle, quiet moments. What if Off went about it in a different way, or more specifically, what if Off was Undertale? I'll be the first to say that the similarities in Off and Undertale are rather uncanny, except that in Off, the negative path isn't an option, it's an obligation set at the beginning of the game. Meanwhile, in Undertale, you're given the chance to hurt monsters, but you can choose the opposite. It starts off with the same, with you picking your name, but instead of telling you your assignment, you fall down to the underground only to start wandering around the place. Therefore, in this sense, you are the child that fell down. They have no significant gender codifiers, so it's easy to identify them as yourself. You're told to explore the underground, and all that you know is that you have to find a way out. At first, you're told by Flowey that it's kill or be killed, making it seem like your journey will be another violent one, until Toriel saves you, admittedly with violence, but hey, nobody's perfect. And then she shows you that you don't have to be murderous in order to deal with monsters. There are alternative methods. This shows a stark contrast to Off, where your mission was to wipe out all life in the game, while here, it's just merely a way to find your way out of the ruins, which you can take one of 3 ways. 1, you can peacefully resolve all your conflicts with the monsters. 2, you can attack some monsters while sparing others. 3, be a violent sociopath and kill everyone. You monster. Now, here's the thing about Undertale and the role you play in all of this. If you decide to be a pacifist, you and the protagonist remain one and the same until the true ending, where you discover their name is actually Frisk and that you've been the benevolent spirit leading them along. Yet, Frisk's actions are entirely their own, and you can say that the pacifist path is the default mode for Frisk as a person, leaving you as just the witness to what would inevitably happen if Frisk was at the reins. Frisk never once addresses you, and while there is a fair amount of fourth wall breaking jokes, it's nothing too out of the ordinary for a game like this. A game that has, for its short time in existence, gained a massive fan following. To say that the Undertale fandom is monstrous is a huge understatement, because at this point we've reached kaiju levels of fandom. The pacifist path isn't just a way for you to go out of your way not to kill the characters, it's a way for you to learn about the characters and connect with them as individuals. You learn about their likes, their dislikes, crushes, how they react to adversity, and all sorts of things that develop them as characters despite the fact just moments ago they were threatening your very life. Many of these characters display traits that people relate to, and unlike in Off, there isn't an otherworldly quality to how they speak or how they react to things. It's very personal, thus you, the player, develop an interpersonal relationship with them far more easily, or at least what you perceive as one. Their actions lead us to view them more as people, and we become empathetic to their troubles. That, of course, causes us to get just as attached as Frisk is to this world. It's the same principle that people declare that they have a waifu, or a husbando, or a best girl from a game, book, show, or movie. In an NPR podcast about developing fictional relationships, commentator Jake Halpern stated this while discussing parasocial relationships and the characters from the hit sitcom Cheers.
The truth is, we all yearn for companionship. The only problem is that, for many of us, myself included, the notion of a well-functioning family and a welcoming group of friends and co-workers is occasionally more easily found on television or in the movies than life itself. After all, in order to maintain real relationships, you have to put in a tremendous amount of effort, making phone calls, returning emails, planning weekends together, etc. To maintain parasocial relationships, however, all you have to do is flick on the TV. If I'm being honest with myself, I have to admit that, at times, Norm, Cliff, Clara, and Sam have formed, well, a kind of para-family to which I yearn to belong. I suppose, as hideously hackneyed as it sounds, it's just like the show's theme song goes. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. Only they don't know your name, and they really don't even know you came.
While Halpern is referring to television when he's talking about this applies to video games as well, especially Undertale. Because even when you beat the game and get the true ending, the game remembers you and everything you've done. Meaning that you return to a world where everyone knows your name, as long as you didn't reset it. Even if you do though, Sans will always know your name, and everything that you did. Speaking of Sans, if you decide to kill monsters for EXP and levels, well, let me say that you're in for a bad time, my friend, because in that playthrough, you will frequently and directly be addressed by the malevolent spirit, Flowey, who has been trying to wipe their world from the face of the earth for quite some time. You are possessing the young Frisk, and you're choosing to decimate the once peaceful world. It is your judgment as the player that chooses the path you walk on and whether or not Frisk is in control of their own destiny. If you decide to become a killer, you are confronted with your sins in the final cutscene with Sans.
Hey, you've been busy, huh? So, I've got a question for you. Do you think even the worst person can change? That everybody can be a good person? They just try? Alright. Well, here's a better question. Do you wanna have a bad time? 'Cause if you take another step forward, you are really not going to like what happens next. Welp. Sorry, old lady. This is why I never make promises. It's a beautiful day outside. Birds are singing. Flowers are blooming. On days like these, kids like you should be burning in hell. Huh. Always wondered why people never use their strongest attack first. Here we go.
What's interesting about this is even if you want to spare Sans, or maybe try to not fight Asgore, you're unable to. If you attempt to spare Sans, he'll kill you, and Asgore's fight isn't even a fight, you just slash him with a knife. And when confronted with Flowey, as opposed to you having a final boss fight with him, you kill him after he begs for his life. To which you respond by callously cutting the treacherous golden flower down to size. You're then confronted with a character that represents yourself and your misdeeds. Undertale's perception of you is odd, to say the least. Unlike in Off, if you confront the batter, you must battle some horrible monster. In this, you come face to face to what appears to be a rosy-cheeked child. Or at least, what remains of it. The game tells you that it was your guidance that allowed all of this to happen, and then if you decide not to erase the world, a decision similar to that in Off, you're instead given a direct question, inquiring, since when were you the one in control? Implying that much like the role of an executioner at the chopping block, you never had much of a say in the game's destiny. You just brought the axe, or in this case a knife, down on whoever was in your way, following orders from another force. Your hands are stained with the blood of monsters that you killed yourself. You are Frisk in the No Mercy run, what's leading you to desire to play Undertale like any other game without a second thought, or out of curiosity to what the No Mercy run is like. Chara is, in many ways, a manifestation of your wicked intent, to go back to a world that you could have been so happy in and deciding to slaughter everyone in your wake. I know they're meant to represent the child Chara Dreamer, the child who had fallen into the underground years prior to the game's events. But in many ways, Chara has become a vessel for more violent tendencies of the person behind the screen. And perhaps they're right in saying that we were never the ones in control of them in the first place. We can allow ourselves to get attached to these characters and develop relationships with them and the world before promptly slaughtering them, or we can just leave them be and finish the pacifist run. It's ultimately our choice, and the sort of parasocial relationships that we form with these characters has a lot to do with that. It makes the potential path of violence a very divisive one. But what if I said there was a game that bore similarities to both Off and Undertale, and yet the path of violence wasn't even an option? Welcome to OneShot, a game that came out prior to Undertale's release that didn't even remotely explore the possibility of violence in the game's narrative. It's more of an exploration/adventure game with some puzzle elements, and these factor into OneShot's meta narrative and the story at large. You play as a mysterious force controlling a little cat person named Nico. Right off the bat, you, the player, are directly addressed by the game itself, which speaks to you about how the world out there is dead, not worth saving, and how you shouldn't even try. If you proceed, it warns you about how your actions won't affect the world around you, but the character you control, Nico, who wishes to leave the world they find themselves in, and only you can help. After that, you're introduced to the concept that the denizens of the world believe that Nico is the Messiah, the role that you as the player are used to taking, but instead you are dubbed a god that can communicate directly to Nico. Quite a departure from the normal character-avatar relationship, and it's explored even further by the gameplay itself. Throughout, Nico actively engages with you, full conversations passing between the two of you as you guide them through the world. You get to know them, and they get to know you, while you're gently nudging them to put the new sun in place to restore the world. You find out that they miss their mother, and they love the taste of pancakes that she makes for them. All while Nico is learning more about the world, developing and furthering a relationship with the people that are in it. Learning these little things makes you develop a relationship, an attachment to Nico and the world around them. But Nico is the main focal point because they are the ones you are controlling. It's not difficult to develop a distinctive guardianship over Nico because that's essentially what you're doing. There will be times where you ask them to do something and they'll protest, thinking it's not a good idea or being aghast at the mere thought of it. Nico is not an avatar or a character that you control, but what the game establishes very early on is that they are a living, breathing creature that is able to protest to what you ask them to do. Which, while in a normal video game, your quest to save the world at any cost may be undeterred by major or minor casualties, OneShot goes out of its way to make you understand just what you're doing and who you'll be affecting by your final decision, especially in regards to the fact that what you're doing is playing a game. There are constant fourth wall breaking moments, but rather than doing referential humor, OneShot does things like tell you to look up a file within the game's files on your computer in order to get an answer to a puzzle, or change the entire desktop background to a solution of a puzzle to solve it. It establishes the fact that you are playing a game that is aware that it is a game. And while Undertale did this through resetting mechanics and the true meanings behind levels and EXP, OneShot does this by manipulating the very fabric of your computer. Even when you turn off the game for too long, Nico speaks about being in the dark or has dreams about their past when you turn off the game, leaving you to wonder just how connected you are to this little feline. It hammers home the fact that you're the master of Nico's destiny as well as the entire game world, and you can choose whether or not you want to see this adventure through, even if it means that Nico can't go home after or choose to doom an entire world by allowing the sun to go out. Either way though, you've learned so much about this world and the residents that you've grown a great attachment to Nico, and Nico has become attached to you as well as the denizens of the world that they currently reside in. This is where the parasocial relationship really kicks in because you're not just a player anymore. You're a guardian of the well-being of multiple life forms, one of which has become like a child to you. You're actively playing a role in their fate and the fate of the world around them, and OneShot goes out of its way to develop Nico's personality in regards to not only other people, but how they interact with you, constantly breaking the fourth wall to ask for advice and discuss with you what you think they should do next. It establishes that Nico, despite being their own person, is able to talk to you just like anyone would be able to in real life, breaking the fourth wall in order to have full-fledged discussions with you about things like hopes and dreams and things like that. We are granted intimate knowledge of Nico's life, and it breaks down normal barriers we may find in a game that doesn't break the fourth wall at all. The lines between the reality of the game and what you're doing sitting behind the computer are rather blurred at this point, making it easy to find ourselves incredibly attached to young Nico after the time we've spent with them. This is similar to how people have grown attached to characters like Sans in Undertale or the Judge in Off, often growing attached to characters that they've spent a lot of time with. This can even help change a person's perspective on the world at large if your media is far-reaching enough. In the article, Can One TV Show Make a Difference? Will and Grace and Parasocial Contact Hypothesis, by Edward Scheipa, Peter B. Gregg, and Dean E. Hughes, they state the following. Parasocial interaction functions in a manner analogous to interpersonal attraction. That is, just as people form positive and negative attitudes towards other people in real life, television viewers develop an affinity with the persona they watch on television. The result of such parasocial relationships is that the more one is attracted to the persona, the more likely a viewer will seek to watch the persona. In Conway and Rubin's 1991 study of television viewing motivation, parasocial interaction was consistently one of the strongest predictors of different viewing motives, including information seeking, entertainment, relaxation, and passing time. Accordingly, we believe it is worth exploring the idea that parasocial interaction can lead to the sort of attitude change that interpersonal contact facilitates. It makes you wonder what the motivations one would have in continuing OneShot even after you've beaten it. You have to jump through a few hoops in order to play the game through again, so it makes you wonder just why you're doing it. Is it because you're attached to the world or to Nico themselves? Which is of course only made clearer throughout your journey because the game itself, or the entity that sent young Nico into the game in the first place, keeps trying to stop Nico from reaching their goal in order to keep them safe. For you see, the entity is a figure that wants to keep Nico sheltered from their true fate, and by attempting to complete the game, you're the enemy. It takes interference from the world's creator in order to get you out of the unwinnable scenario at the climax of the original game's ending, which gives you the choice of either having Nico putting the light bulb in the tower or smashing it and returning home. Either route leading to the game being over and you not being able to play it again without some shenanigans with the game's files. That is, until the Solstice update. This is where OneShot gets quite a bit more complicated because now you're able to enter the world again. This time though, Nico finds out that they are just someone who was brought to this world to play this game on your computer. That you're the one sustaining this world and essentially sending them off on this journey all over again. They do not react well to this. Nico has grown to trust you and now feels as though you betrayed them. This is the first time they become hostile to you because in many ways you are in part responsible for what's going on here. You are simulating the world that Nico is in, and the fact that you don't tell them any of this or inform them of the fact that the people in this world are just code doesn't sit well with them. Our actions as the guardian of Nico have inadvertently hurt them more than it's helped them. Nico was brought into OneShot by having it simulated on our computer. All of the game files on the hard drive are supposed to be helping to sustain this place, and yet it's still dying. Throughout the Solstice ending, established characters that we've been with since the beginning of the game are starting to die or disappear because the world is falling apart. This is our final ending. To contrast, in Undertale, the final ending for each respective paths isn't about the world falling apart because of the actions of a computer program, but the threat is either you, or Chara, or Azrael, a force that for the most part is confined within the game's world. In Off, it's the batter or his machinations that leads to the ruin of the world, or the near ruin of it, depending on who you side with in the end. But in OneShot, the world we visit is already dying. In fact, it was placed on our computer already falling apart, and the Solstice ending is the final ending. No more resets, no more revisits. The world of OneShot is actually going to die with no backups if you don't save it. Before, the choice was to allow Nico to shatter the light bulb, dooming the world but allowing them to return home, or to have them use the sun to save the world while disabling their one-way home. You're not playing the role of the parental guardian anymore, you're the guardian who is guiding Nico on their new and far more dangerous quest. Your mission? Try to figure out what's going on as characters you've known since the beginning are effectively killed by the red squares that have plagued you since your first journey. Yet these are far more violent and are consuming everything in sight. It's not a choice of what to do with Nico anymore. It's to protect not just Nico, but this world. Our role is effectively evolving and becoming more downplayed because the Solstice update is far more about Nico and their role with the world than their relationship with us, even if we get addressed a few times, which, in the end, makes OneShot even more interesting. We reach the world machine and we are able to talk to the entity, the thing in the computer that addressed us during our first playthrough and tried to stop us from reaching our goal. Now, after the Solstice update, it speaks about its programming, how it wanted to protect Nico, and how it hadn't meant for things to get so bad. Nico reasoning with the entity the whole time. While it does refer to us, in this moment, do you want to know what I saw? Nico growing up. We as players succeeded in our role as the guardian, and now we are seeing just how much they've grown before they go back home to their mother. Even if they may not remember everything afterwards, we know that in the end we might have made a difference in this tiny digital cat person's life. Out of all the relationships I speak about throughout this video, I personally find myself the most attached to Nico, who I have called my cat child on more than one occasion. When I speak about parasocial relationships, I want to assure you, my viewers, that I'm not doing it to say that what you feel for these characters, whether on screen or on the page, is any less real. More so, I'm just trying to explain what it is and where it comes from. Where these narratives originate and how they make us feel is a big reason as to why they are successful as narratives. A big part of video games is interactivity, and it's why it's unlike any other medium in the world. We have to interact with the game in order to get something out of it, even if it's just pressing forward on the control pad. It's something that the other mediums don't have, and this interactivity allows us to get more invested in the worlds we explore and the characters we interact with. Think of a game like Mass Effect. You can actually put yourself in the game and have your own galactic adventures as Shepard fighting off Reapers. It's like a cinematic trilogy that you're the star of. If it was a film series, while there would be people invested in its conclusion, it wouldn't have the downright insane fervor people worked themselves into because of the original endings. Was it because we as gamers were spoiled with good writing? Was it because the original ending was lazy? Or was it because we had done so much throughout our intergalactic journey and yet we didn't see any of it come to fruition other than a few small differences? We became attracted to games due to their interactivity, we formed relationships with the world, and to us, the game world itself was very real. The way the game is written or designed and how the game endears itself to the player is key to getting a player attached to the game. Getting the player invested through fourth wall breaking and narrative tricks is the perfect way to make your game a memorable one. I hope this look at video game narratives and parasocial relationships between players and characters has been an informative one. I encourage you to continue the conversation in the comments below. I'm Red Angel, and I'll see you next time.